Imagine a time before history was written, before even the Egyptians built their pyramids. This is where our story begins. Whispers on the wind. Myths passed down through generations. This is the world of ancient Mesopotamia. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers snaked through the land, giving life to a vibrant culture. In this world of gods and monsters, a story was born. This is the Epic of Gilgamesh. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers were the lifeblood of Mesopotamia. They provided water for crops and a means of transportation. Along their banks, cities rose and fell. Empires clashed and crumbled. And it is here in the city of Uruk that our story truly begins. Uruk was a city of grandeur and power. Its walls, built of mud brick, seemed to stretch as far as the eye could see. Inside, temples soared towards the heavens. Priests chanted prayers to the gods. Kings ruled with absolute authority. It was a time of both great innovation and brutal conflict. Life in Uruk was a tapestry woven from many threads. Farmers toiled under the hot sun, coaxing life from the fertile soil. Merchants bartered for goods in the bustling marketplace. But Uruk was also a city of shadows and secrets. Gilgamesh was 2/3 god and 1/3 human. This divine heritage made him both powerful and flawed. He was strong, handsome, and possessed of unmatched courage. But he was also arrogant, cruel, and driven by a restless spirit. Gilgamesh ruled Uruk with an iron fist. He saw himself as above his people. Their needs meant little to him. He used his power for his own pleasure, taking what he wanted and doing as he pleased. The people of Uruk trembled before him. They cried out to the gods for help. They prayed for someone to save them from their king. The gods, hearing their pleas, decided to act. They would create a champion named Enkidu. Far from the grandeur of Uruk, in the untamed wilds, a different kind of power was taking shape. Enkidu, born of clay and the god's will, was a creature of the wilderness. He knew nothing of cities or kings. He ran with the gazelles and drank with the beasts. Enkidu was the protector of the animals. He tore down the traps set by hunters. He filled in the pits dug to capture his brethren. He was a thorn in the side of civilization, a force of nature unleashed. Word of this wild man reached Uruk. Whispers of a being of immense strength and primal fury. At first, Gilgamesh paid little heed, but the whispers grew louder, and Gilgamesh's arrogance began to waver. One night, as Gilgamesh slept, he had a dream. The gods spoke of Enkidu and a destiny intertwined. Gilgamesh woke with a start, his heart pounding in his chest. The dream had shaken him. He couldn't shake the feeling that something momentous was about to happen. He summoned his advisors, his priests, and his soothsayers. He recounted his dream, demanding to know its meaning. They huddled together, poring over ancient texts, consulting the stars.
Enkidu is your other half, great king, one of the priests proclaimed, his voice trembling slightly. He is the one who will challenge you, who will show you the true meaning of your strength.
Gilgamesh scoffed, but couldn't ignore the words of the gods. The priests proposed a plan. They would send a woman, a harlot named Shamhat, to tame the wild man. She would teach him the ways of civilization, the pleasures of the flesh. He would be drawn to her beauty, her touch, and in that moment of vulnerability, he would lose his wildness.
Shamhat was hesitant. She had heard tales of Enkidu's strength, his ferocity, but the priests assured her that she would be safe. They gave her gifts, fine clothes, and perfumes to entice the wild man. And so, with a heavy heart, Shamhat set out into the wilderness. She found Enkidu at a watering hole, surrounded by animals. He was everything she had imagined, powerful, intimidating, and utterly wild.
Shamhat smiled and began to speak, her voice soft and melodic. Slowly, surely, Enkidu began to succumb to her charms. For 6 days and 7 nights, Shamhat remained with Enkidu. She taught him the ways of men, how to eat and drink like a civilized being. She clothed him in fine garments and anointed him with fragrant oils. And in her arms, he discovered a passion he had never known before.
But with this newfound knowledge came a sense of loss. Enkidu began to feel a pang of longing for something he couldn't quite place. He had known the freedom of the wild, the companionship of animals. Now he yearned for something more.
Shamhat saw the change in him and knew the time had come. She told him of Gilgamesh, the mighty king of Uruk, and of the prophecy that bound them together.
Enkidu felt a surge of excitement and set out to meet Gilgamesh. Word of Enkidu's arrival spread through Uruk like wildfire. People whispered in the streets, their voices hushed with a mixture of fear and anticipation. This wild man, this creature of the gods, was coming to challenge their king. What would happen when these two forces collided? Gilgamesh, too, felt a surge of excitement, a thrill he hadn't experienced in years. He had grown tired of ruling, of the endless parade of supplicants and sycophants. He longed for a challenge, a worthy opponent to test his might against. The two met in the heart of Uruk, in the shadow of the great ziggurat. The crowd parted like the sea before them, their eyes wide with awe and trepidation. Gilgamesh stood tall and proud, his royal robes shimmering in the sunlight. Enkidu, clad in the skins of wild animals, his hair long and unkempt, met the king's gaze without flinching. The clash, when it came, was earth-shattering. For what seemed like an eternity, they fought, each blow echoing through the city like thunder. But as the fight raged, something began to change. The initial fury gave way to a grudging respect. Each warrior recognized in the other a strength, a skill that they had never encountered before. They were evenly matched, two sides of the same coin, and as the battle reached its climax, a strange thing happened. Gilgamesh, realizing that he could not defeat Enkidu through brute force alone, changed his tactics. He began to fight with cunning, using his wits as much as his strength. Enkidu, in turn, adapted to Gilgamesh's moves, countering each attack with surprising agility and grace. The battle, instead of being a brutal slugfest, became a deadly dance, a testament to their combined might and skill. Finally, with a resounding crash, the two warriors fell to the ground, exhausted, but still locked in combat. For a moment, they lay there, chests heaving, staring into each other's eyes. Then, slowly, a smile spread across Gilgamesh's face.
You're a worthy opponent, Enkidu, perhaps even a friend?
Enkidu hesitated for a moment, surprised by the king's words.
Perhaps, Gilgamesh, perhaps.
The people of Uruk, witnessing this unexpected truce, erupted in cheers. They had expected bloodshed, destruction. Instead, they were presented with something far more profound, a bond of friendship forged in the fires of combat. And so began one of the most legendary partnerships in all of mythology. Gilgamesh, no longer content with the confines of his palace, embraced the world with Enkidu at his side. They embarked on a series of adventures, their exploits becoming the stuff of legend. They battled monstrous beasts, righting wrongs and protecting the innocent. Their greatest challenge, however, was yet to come. Ishtar, the goddess of love and war, angered by Gilgamesh's rejection of her advances, unleashed the Bull of Heaven upon Uruk. The battle with the Bull of Heaven was long and arduous. The earth shook, the sky crackled with lightning, and the air was thick with the stench of fear and sulfur. But Gilgamesh and Enkidu, their movements perfectly synchronized, fought with the courage and skill of seasoned warriors. Finally, with a mighty blow, Gilgamesh pierced the bull's thick hide, its blood staining the ground a crimson red. The bull of heaven let out a deafening bellow before collapsing, its massive form crushing buildings beneath it. Victory was theirs, but it came at a price. The gods, angered by the death of their sacred beast, decreed that one of the heroes must die. And so they turned their gaze upon Enkidu. Gilgamesh, his heart shattered by the death of his friend, was inconsolable. He had faced countless dangers, stared death in the face, and emerged victorious. But the loss of Enkidu cut him to the core, revealing the fragility of his own mortality. It was then that Gilgamesh made a decision that would change his life forever. He would seek out Utnapishtim, the only mortal to have attained immortality, and learn the secret of eternal life. He would cheat death, not just for himself, but for Enkidu as well. His quest would take him to the ends of the earth, across treacherous mountains and scorching deserts, to the mythical Cedar Forest, guarded by the fearsome Humbaba. Driven by grief and a desperate hope, Gilgamesh set out into the unknown. The journey to the Cedar Forest was fraught with peril. Gilgamesh, still reeling from Enkidu's death, pushed himself to his limits. He crossed desolate plains where the sun beat down mercilessly. He scaled treacherous mountains where the wind howled like a banshee. But through it all, the memory of Enkidu spurred him on. He wasn't alone on this journey. He had brought with him a small band of loyal followers, men who had fought by his side, who had witnessed his transformation from arrogant king to heartbroken hero. The Cedar Forest, when they finally reached it, was like something out of a dream. Towering cedar trees, ancient and immense, stretched towards the heavens, their branches forming a dense canopy that blotted out the sun, for this was the domain of Humbaba, the monstrous guardian of the forest. Humbaba was the stuff of nightmares. His face was a grotesque mask of rage, his voice a thunderous roar that shook the very earth. His breath was a poisonous wind, capable of withering plants and scorching the skin from a man's bones. Even the bravest of Gilgamesh's followers trembled at the thought of facing such a creature. But Gilgamesh, his heart hardened by grief and fueled by a desperate hope, refused to be cowed. He had faced death itself and emerged defiant. He would not be deterred by a mere monster, no matter how fearsome.
Humbaba, I am Gilgamesh, king of Uruk. I have come for the secret of immortality, and I will not be denied.
The forest itself seemed to hold its breath as Humbaba turned his terrible gaze upon the intruders. The Fall of Humbaba. The battle, when it came, was one for the ages. Humbaba, enraged by their defiance, unleashed his fury upon them. The ground shook with his every step. Trees were uprooted by his flailing limbs, and the air was thick with the stench of his poisonous breath. Gilgamesh and his men fought with the courage of cornered wolves. They dodged Humbaba's attacks, their movements swift and sure, their blades flashing in the dappled sunlight. But for all their bravery, they were no match for the monster's raw power. Just when it seemed all hope was lost, Shamash, the god of the sun, took pity on Gilgamesh. He unleashed a mighty wind that buffeted Humbaba, throwing the monster off balance. Seizing his chance, Gilgamesh charged forward, his sword held high. He plunged the blade deep into Humbaba's chest, the monster letting out a roar of pain and rage that shook the very heavens. Humbaba staggered back, his eyes wide with disbelief. He looked down at the wound in his chest, the lifeblood of the forest staining his hands a dark, viscous green. Then, with a final, earth-shattering roar, he collapsed, his massive form crushing the trees beneath him. Echoes in the forest. Silence descended upon the forest once more, but this time it was a different kind of silence. A silence heavy with the weight of victory, but also with the knowledge of the price that had been paid. Gilgamesh stood over Humbaba's fallen form, his chest heaving, his sword dripping with the monster's blood. He had triumphed, but there was no joy in his victory, only a profound sense of loss. He had come to the Cedar Forest seeking the secret to immortality, hoping to cheat death and reunite with his beloved friend. But as he stood there, surrounded by the carnage of battle, he realized the futility of his quest. The forest, once a place of serene beauty, now bore the scars of their conflict. The air, once filled with the sweet scent of cedar, now reeked of blood and death. And in the echoes of Humbaba's final roar, Gilgamesh heard a chilling truth. Immortality, he realized, was not something to be found in some distant land or won through acts of heroism. It was an illusion, a cruel trick played by the gods on mortal men. True immortality, he began to understand, lay not in cheating death, but in the legacy we leave behind, in the stories that are told about us long after we are gone. And so, with a heavy heart, Gilgamesh turned his back on the Cedar Forest and began the long journey home, carrying with him the weight of his experiences and a newfound understanding of the true meaning of life and death. The journey back to Uruk was different. The victory over Humbaba felt hollow, empty. The weight of Enkidu's death pressed down on Gilgamesh, heavier than ever. He had slain a monster, but death itself remained undefeated. How could he return to his city, to his people, with empty hands and a broken heart? Gone was the youthful exuberance, the thirst for adventure. In its place, a gnawing fear. The fear of his own mortality, of the inevitable day when he too would join Enkidu in the land of shadows. He had tasted immortality, however briefly, and the thought of losing it forever was unbearable. His followers, sensing his despair, tried to comfort him. They spoke of his strength, his courage, the good he had done for Uruk, but their words were like dust in the wind, offering little solace to his troubled soul. He thought of Enkidu, his friend, his brother. He remembered their laughter, their adventures, the bond they had shared. He would give anything, sacrifice anything to see Enkidu's face again, to hear his voice, to feel the warmth of his presence. One night, as Gilgamesh sat by the campfire, his mind awhirl with grief and longing, an idea took root. A desperate, almost insane idea. He had heard whispers, legends, of a man named Utnapishtim, a man who had survived the Great Flood, who had been granted immortality by the gods. He sought out the oldest of his followers, a man named Urshanabi, who had once been a ferryman on the waters of death. Urshanabi listened patiently as Gilgamesh spoke, his eyes widening as he realized the king's intentions.
My king, the journey to Utnapishtim is fraught with peril. It lies beyond the edge of the known world, across treacherous seas and through lands where no man has dared to venture.
But Gilgamesh was undeterred. He had faced down monsters, defied the gods themselves. What was one more journey, even one as perilous as this, if it meant a chance to cheat death itself? The journey was long and arduous. They sailed across vast, uncharted seas, the sun beating down mercilessly, the wind whipping the waves into a frenzy. They faced storms that threatened to tear their ship apart, and strange creatures lurked beneath the waves, their eyes glowing in the depths. They traveled through desolate landscapes, where the ground was scorched and barren, and the air hung heavy and still. They encountered strange and wondrous creatures, some benevolent, some hostile, but all a testament to the power and mystery of the world beyond the known. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they reached their destination. The land of Dilmun, where Utnapishtim and his wife lived, untouched by time or death. It was a paradise, a place of breathtaking beauty and tranquility. lush gardens filled with fragrant flowers, crystal-clear rivers teeming with fish, and the air alive with the sound of birdsong. The sun seemed to shine brighter here, the sky a deeper blue, and Gilgamesh felt a flicker of hope ignite within him. Utnapishtim, when he finally met Gilgamesh, was not what he expected. He was not a god, nor a being of immense power. He was an old man, his face etched with the passage of time.
My son, you seek a prize that is not meant for mortals. Death is the fate of all men.
Gilgamesh, his hopes dashed, felt a wave of despair wash over him. He had come so far, endured so much, only to be met with the same bitter truth.
The true measure of a man, Gilgamesh, is how he chooses to live. Go back to Uruk, my son. Rule wisely and justly.
The journey back to Uruk was a blur to Gilgamesh. Utnapishtim's words echoed in his ears, a constant reminder of the bitter truth he had been so desperate to deny. Death was inevitable, even for a king. Immortality was a myth, a cruel jest played by the gods on mortal men. He had left Uruk a grief-stricken hero, desperate to cheat death itself. He returned a humbled king, his spirit weary, his dreams of immortality shattered. He had faced monsters and gods, traversed the furthest reaches of the known world, only to find solace in the wisdom of an old man who had learned to accept the natural order of things. He thought of Enkidu, his friend, his brother-in-arms. The memory of their adventures, their laughter, their shared bond, brought a bittersweet ache to his heart. He would never forget Enkidu, but he could no longer cling to the hope of their reunion in some distant afterlife. As he approached the familiar gates of his city, he felt a strange sense of detachment. He had been gone for so long, had seen and experienced so much, that Uruk seemed almost foreign to him now. The bustling streets, the noise, the smells, all seemed distant and unreal. He stood before the massive city walls, their mud brick surfaces baked hard by the relentless sun. He remembered the day he had ordered their construction, driven by a need to prove his strength, his power over men and nature. They had seemed like an impenetrable barrier then, a testament to his greatness. Now, they seemed like a cage, a reminder of the limitations of his mortal existence. He thought of the people he ruled, the lives entrusted to his care. He had once viewed them as subjects, pawns in his own grand game of power. Now he saw them differently. They were mortal, just like him, their lives fleeting and precious. Their hopes, their dreams, their fears mirrored his own. He had sought immortality for himself, but in doing so, he had neglected the needs of his people, the responsibility he bore as their king. He had been so consumed by his own grief, his own desire to escape death, that he had forgotten the true meaning of life. He entered the city, not as a conquering hero, but as a penitent king. He walked the streets, not with his usual arrogance, but with a newfound humility. He listened to the concerns of his people, their tales of hardship and resilience, their simple joys and quiet sorrows. He saw the toll that time had taken on his city, the cracks in the walls, the faded paint on the buildings, the wrinkles etched on the faces of his people. Time marched on, relentless and unforgiving, leaving its mark on everything and everyone. He could not stop time nor escape its embrace. All he could do was cherish the moments he had. He returned to his palace, a place of duty and responsibility. He ruled with wisdom and compassion, guided by lessons learned. He ordered new temples, places of solace and reflection. As Gilgamesh grew older, he felt the weight of time pressing down on him. His hair turned silver, his skin creased with wrinkles, his steps slowed by the passage of years. But his spirit remained strong, tempered by experience, his heart softened by loss. He knew that his time on earth was drawing to a close, that he too would one day join Enkidu in the land of shadows. but he no longer feared death. He had made peace with his own mortality, found solace in the legacy he would leave behind. He had come to understand that true immortality lay not in cheating death, but in the stories we tell, the memories we leave behind, the impact we have on the lives of others. And so, the Epic of Gilgamesh was born. Etched onto clay tablets, passed down through generations, it became one of the oldest surviving works of literature, a testament to the enduring power of storytelling. Gilgamesh may have failed in his quest for immortality, but in a way, he achieved it. His story, his struggles, his triumphs, and his failures continue to resonate with readers thousands of years later. He lives on in the words etched onto those ancient tablets, a reminder that even the most powerful of kings are mortal, and that true immortality lies not in cheating death, but in the legacy we leave behind. The Epic of Gilgamesh is more than just a story. It is a mirror reflecting the hopes, fears, and dreams of humanity. It is a timeless tale of friendship, loss, and the search for meaning in a world where death is inevitable. And in the end, it is a story about the power of storytelling itself, the ability of words to transcend time and connect us to the past, present, and future. Gilgamesh may be gone, but his story lives on, a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit.